And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor, except in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his own household." So the confusing title out of the way. This is about the intro sequence. The introduction video to this video series came before. Specifically, I will discuss the following segments taking place on the island of Astart. You're the son of a fisherman, destined to catch fish, but not ready to do anything as of yet. So your father sets off without you. It's not like there's anything else to do either, since seemingly no other landmasses exist. At least everyone says so. You're friends with the local prince and the two of you do a lot of snooping around, despite the adults telling you to not go explore the island. You find a shrine, do some questing, and once you find plenty of MacGuffins, you start an adventure for real. That's not a lot happening, but there's a lot of detail in these 2 to 3 hours of gameplay, or 6 hours in the original release. I want to start by exploring the first scene, since it allows me to later on lead into a more important point I want to make. Why would the protagonist go on these adventures with Kiefer? Your path as a fisherman is laid out before you by your father, who is the #1 fisherman. It's the most respected job in this world, the closest thing they have to celebrities, and it's the job where you see most of the world. But it's not really laid out before you. They say you're your father's flesh and blood and therefore you will be successful, but Pike, your alcoholic uncle, is seen as a failure and everyone talks trash about him. In its current state, everyone in the world thinks that he's a loser, even if they don't hate him for it. And he really is scum. He scams people, drinks away all that money, doesn't pay his rent or even his tab. And everyone acknowledges that you are scrawny and weak. Another fisherman puts it really well. The only thing the young fishermen have going for them is their physical attributes, since they have no experience. And you, despite being 16, are too weak physically to ever be of any help. Just look at the difference between you and your father. Even if it wasn't for your curiosity driving you to go on your own adventure, you wouldn't make for a good fisherman. The cook says it as it is. But this leads me right to the point that I am really interested in. Why do the protagonists look so much like children? All their art looks like children and they're treated like children too. But their canon ages are 16 for the hero and 17 for Kiefer. To explain why they look and are acted towards that way, I need to go on a tangent. So first things first, I want to mention the Japanese title, Warriors of Eden. The intro sequence is difficult to discuss without that context, but even in the international release the illusion is fairly obvious. On one hand, questioning the integrity of a fantasy world is always going to leave some holes. Dragon Quest worlds are never completely functional. Not every house will have a toilet, for example. You're already expected to suspend your disbelief, but here it's taken to a noticeable extreme. For example, the people don't take their world for granted. It's partly exposition for the player, but lines like "we're all like a big family" are nonsensical. There's nobody else, this would be needless to say. And logistically, where do they get their gold? Why do they have gold as a currency? Why do the fishermen have so many weapons on board? There's a map and it clearly shows other landmasses. There's holes that even a child can see. Some of the adults even had their own doubts as children, but at one point they all simply decided to not question it anymore. The Matrix analogy has a different, specifically political connotation nowadays, but Dragon Quest VII's intro sequence is more similar to that than the Garden of Eden in a few ways. It's not a sin to choose the red pill, it won't be punished by God. In Dragon Quest VII you could choose to live in ignorant bliss, but the inherent desire for truth pushes you to scrutinize the world fundamentally. And unlike eating the forbidden fruit, you weather the world with that knowledge. You don't screw over all of humanity. The reference to the Garden Eden in the Japanese title is still justified for a different reason. The island really is God's garden. As an old woman puts it, Everything is just as the Almighty wants it to be, so you shouldn't go looking for truth. God's influence on the island is tangible. There is undeniable proof of God in the Dragon Quest world, and there is the possibility to use him as a get out of jail free card for questions raised by children. Sometimes it seems like there could be a conspiracy between the adults to keep the kids from finding out the truth about the world, similar to God trying to keep Adam and Eve away from the Tree of Knowledge by lying. I don't want to discuss too many details from the biblical story since I'm too small of a creator to not get lynch mobbed over biblical hot takes, and there's not really much of a conspiracy. The adults have your best interest in mind, or they simply don't know better. But the message Dragon Quest VII sends is clear. The adults of the island are only infantilizing their children by keeping the truth from them. By lying even more about possible dangers like bears out there on the island to narrow down their already small horizon even farther. The bears are equatable with a boogeyman you tell your children about to keep them on their best behavior, but the children are way too old for that to stop them now. The people of the island, in an attempt to shield their children from the world, are anti-progressive, anti-intellectual, and that is what kept the children as small as they are. And for now, that's what I believe to be the reason for their physical appearance. Despite their relatively high age, they still look and are spoken to that way, since the parents are sheltering the children from reality. In terms of life experience and how much they know about the world, they are still children, and that's what Dragon Quest VII is commenting on, even in its character designs. The characters won't grow up just by getting older. They need to break free from this infantilization and learn about the world on their own. And whether I call this act eating the forbidden fruit or the red pill, it's all the same. Earlier Dragon Quest games started with a call to action by a king. When you are summoned by the king in this game, he tries to prevent you from going on an adventure. There is no call to action, you need to start acting on your own accord. At least that's the first layer of my current answer. So about the actual characters. I know they develop a lot more later on, but this is what they represent right now. Maribel early on is just female Prince Charmless, and she also knows to pretend not to be awful around certain people, so she's more insidious and manipulative. You really do not want her on your adventure. Well, some of you do because of the humiliation kink you harbor, or more precisely because you are down bad for the tsundere archetype. But she very clearly forces her way onto your party, and while she gets less terrible later on, you're not really going on an adventure in a party of 3, but you're hanging out with your buddy Kiefer while Maribel tags along. I wonder whether my opinion on this will change, but I'll remember not liking her development because earning it doesn't happen in text. Her development is entirely independent from what's going on in the story. Maribel and her developments aren't related to any of your adventure, and it's not even organic since you never have any dialogue with her. It's assumed that you automatically grow on her because you're on an adventure together, and that's really shallow if it's the way I remember. Prince Kiefer plays with you in secrecy and has been doing so for an undefined amount of time. Usually children in a setting such as this sneak off to play make-believe and pretend to go on adventures. They will set off, not to imaginary, but real existing, yet still different worlds soon enough. Partly because you're treated as a child, but more so because of this aspect of the setting, the wonderful adventures we associate with kids' movies or fairy tales. The game invokes the feeling of being a child again. You will still see struggles, and Dragon Quest VII gets depressing sometimes, but the magical vibe is going to be around as well for a lot, especially in the early sections. Anyways, Kiefer is the only one who really sets anything in motion, and he always seems to be the most confident and competent in your group. Even now he's doing all the legwork, and none of the pieces would be in place without him. One thing you learn about him is that his mother died a long time ago and he's been taking care of his sister ever since. This sounds like a harsh contrast to Maribel, but what they have in common is that they both yearn for adventure. And so do you if you decided to play a JRPG. Both of them want to escape the path that has been set out for them by their family. Maribel is upset at being the mayor's daughter, and Kiefer doesn't want to become king. and you probably don't play Dragon Quest VII to become a fisherman. I do think it's interesting how you still step in your father's footsteps a little. While gathering pieces for the first tablet, the last piece is prophesied to be on your father's boat. So when he returns from sea after a venture that was only as successful as it was because he decided to leave his comfort zone and sail farther north than usual, after this little adventure of his, he hands you the final piece of the key that allows you to start going on adventures of your own. He's not quite passing the torch, he still has plenty of fire left, but you're very much becoming like him, even more so than if you had stayed in your small village and tried to become exactly what he is. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I like how you are still going to be cool with everyone back home, even after you go adventuring. They really only had your best interest in mind. If I remember correctly, unconditional love among family is one of the recurring themes in this game, and as stated earlier, the whole island is like one big family. I guess to get back to biblical references, God still loved all of his creation despite the original sin. I also find it interesting that the only person willing to help you on your quest for now is a hermit. A social outcast that people write off as crazy, who talks trash about everyone else, and that will become relevant again later on. Even if most people aren't in on anything and have no stakes in whether you explore or not, the shrine is made out as something that proper, normal people don't talk about, even if it takes up such a large amount of the world. There's a lot of ways to interpret this, but for now I will say that it enforces a vital feeling to any adventure. As Kiefer likes to point out, being special or chosen for more, going against the grain. The rest of this first story segment is mostly setting things up that will become important later on, or it's not especially meaningful. To conclude, I do think I found a new appreciation for this intro sequence. It's really long, but it has to be to support the next 100 hours. Last time I was impatiently rushing through, I always remember the side stories as entirely unrelated, but with how the stage was set, everything you do from now will tie into your coming of age. Every new island is another piece of the world you get to know, and every adventure is one more step towards growing out of your knowledge. And now, only half prepared, you're thrust into an adventure, in way over your head. Next time I'll finally be able to talk about the first side story, and it's a good one to look forward to.